apparently a minor issue, but we won't let it distract us from our daily review of the bread and circuses. Today is 3/29/2024, Infinite Plane Radio, open phones for open minds. The phone is on the screen if you want to call in. And on the website where I send you the link, ips.monster, there's a link to join my Skype. You can join me on Skype. Very easy to do. Just get the app and you can connect. And the other option is also the Discord server. And in fact, I'm in voice chat right now. So if you go into the Discord server, I'm there. I'm not listening, but the audio is on, and there may be some others there. And likely after, I'll jump in. The glitch I was referring to is for some reason the audio encoder isn't logging in. So if you're listening on the audio streams, you're not going to be getting the live stream tonight. I'll fix it later. Yeah, almost 3:30, a very psyopy day. 3:30 would be, I guess it would be the date that Ronald Reagan was shot by John Hinckley, who had JFK's birthday, weirdly. 3:30 would be, is that the anniversary of the Rodney King beating? I have to make sure I get all my atrocities lined up here correctly as far as their dates and their hoax anniversaries. And we haven't found a real atrocity yet. If it's highly publicized, it's fake. It's part of a movie. Like, when you go to the movies, nobody goes into the movie theater thinking, okay, I'm going to see something real. Like, you go in there knowing it's a movie. And when a properly trained auto hoaxer assesses the media, they go into that with the same frame of mind. I am not going to be looking at a window that gives me information about what's happening all over the world. No, I'm looking at a filter, a movie version that I'm meant to take literally. All the religions of the world would like their believers to take their books literally, to become fundamentalists, and the mass media expects the same out of its believers. We are joined by Clockwork 113, HBIC, Elephant Tusks, Frank Murr, Violet, FMGR, and Exploring again. Thank you for joining. We have quite a lot to go over. A lot of trends have been picked up lately in the Discord server. Really fascinating when you get into the metascript. And when I say metascript, here's my contention. And I will debate this. I'll fight for this. I'll fight over this. I mean, this is real. This is the truth. Our reality is news bent by a monolithic government presence. There's a government, not multiple governments. They all share the same backstage, as evidenced by the space program. And by all indications, they write our history decades in advance in broad strokes, but more nuanced, I would imagine, in shorter periods of time, like month by month, week by week. But it's coordinated. The news events are coordinated with everything happening in mass media, as in entertainment, in politics, with celebrities, in sports. There's a monolithic media which is not compartmentalized. I mean, from the outside, you think, okay, that's news, that's entertainment, that's politics. No, it's absolutely uniform. And they do this so they can write, or rather act out, their prefabricated histories. So if history is written in advance and their objective is to make it happen as realistically as possible, you can understand then why you have a non-stop succession of psyops. And there's been a lot of conversation lately about the meaning of predictive programming, and I've been suggesting that it's just a form of propaganda, but I think it's even more. Yeah, it does serve the role of propaganda, as in repetition, repeating the message again and again before they actually do it on TV and pretend it's real so you all believe it. Yeah, repetition is a part of it, and it's very important not to mystify predictive programming. And here's a piece I put this morning, Autohoaxology 101, it's the blog. Predictive programming creates immersive illusions. This is why they do it. It has nothing to do with the bad guys mocking us or absolving themselves of karmic retribution. You can go ahead and scrap all of those mystifying explanations. Non-explanations. I mean, those are terrible ways to explain away and also conceal the perps. We can identify the metascriptors, and it's not the demiurge. It's not God. It's not Hell 9000. It's not Satan. It's names you would recognize. Names like Tom Clancy, Stanley Kubrick, James Cameron, Christopher Nolan, and the list goes on. And we're talking about the worldview shapers and the artists who serve the state church. And mass media, if you haven't noticed, has actually supplanted religion and is the de facto state church for the entire, quote, globe. But let's talk about immersive illusions, and I'll open up phones. Now, this is why they do predictive programming. It creates an illusion that's reinforced by feedback from within the media echo chambers. Consider the hoax based television series Space Cadets, in which contestants were convinced they were in low Earth orbit while still on the ground in a simulated spacecraft, simulating space travel. Quote, this show consistently raised the issue of how immersive illusions can convince average people over a period of time, especially when reinforced as part of a group of believers, especially when this includes men in white coats and other authority figures. Outsiders, in this case the viewers at home, the audience, will see the hoax as laughable. But inside, the cadets, the contestants, had been lulled into an alternate universe. And this was accomplished by maintaining a barrier between the actors who were pretending to be contestants and the real contestants. So there were 11 people on board. Half of them were dupes. And they used these actors, liars you could say, to prevent any of the dupes from forming any conspiracy theories. Like maybe positing that perhaps they're not really in space. So they weren't able to figure it out. So predictive programming employs repetitions of themes and narratives, and so much that they are inescapable. If you saw Taylor Swift's face at least once from between, we'll say, October and December, then they got you. You are in the illusion with the rest of us. Same goes for any other major event, any current thing that you can't help but run into in the real world. Right now, we've been talking about the bridge in Baltimore, which is another PSYOP event, staged, controlled demolition. Nobody died, nobody cried. However, it has real world consequences, which we'll probably get into here. The point of it being, the real world consequences are part of the echo chamber, part of the reinforcement, which makes a fabrication real. They do what would be called, or they introduce hyperstitions. The feedback loop of media true believers maintains the illusions and hyperstitions. It's like if nobody went to church, that religion would go away if nobody believed it. And it's the same thing with mass media. I would say it's a mass agreed upon delusion to quote leave the world behind, which seems to be the frame of reference for every calamity that has occurred since that movie was released on 11/22. Well, that was in the theaters. On Netflix, it was 12/8. And 12/8, that number is going to pop up in some of our conversations today. The boat hitting the bridge, it falls down at 128. The movie, of course, 12/8 kind of stood out there. And there were a few others, as you'll see. There's some kind of significance, I think, attached to a few elements, namely the name Francis Scott Key. And it has some pretty strong tie-ins to the movie, as we'll get to. All right, let's see what we have here. Anulfo says, I suppose MSM doesn't pay taxes like any other religion. My definition of religion is kind of like something that has a system of beliefs, but a regimented worldview. It's all about the worldview, the agreed upon premise. So in my religion, we live on a ball floating in space, and nothing means anything, and we are all barely domesticated apes with massive egos who need to be regulated. That's for our own good. We need to be dumbed down, hyped up with superstitions, and kept in a state of mostly, I would say, ignorance about wider questions. Just let the experts think for us. We outsource so much of our perception. Other religions believe in, well, this is where it gets kind of interesting because, like, I would contend that scientism is more or less the dominant world religion, but it's really just an iteration of the old religions. I often point out how Noah's myth has been brought back as Noah's myth. The whole thing about the ark and the flood. I say myth, it's a religious belief. People believe that Noah was warned that the wickedness was going to trigger a flood from God. So he built the ark. Loads everybody in. According to Mike Johnson, he also loaded in dinosaurs, which doesn't make sense. Again, I've been trying to figure out, well, where did these dinosaurs go? But there are people who are Bible literalists who do believe in the literal Noah's Ark, including Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Mike Johnson. And you might think that's a ridiculous story. We don't change our sinful ways. God's going to wipe us out with a big flood. Well, today it's the same story, but the wickedness has been moved to the other side. It's no longer this old, archaic concept of sin. Now it's your carbon footprint. A new kind of original sin, but this one can be diagnosed, it can be recognized, measured with science. And you also have the virus, which has replaced the concept of sin. Gaia is the new God construct, and Gaia also will use floods, global warming, etc. We have space arcs. Same thing, same story. Elephant Tusk says, Tim, what's your theory on why things have become so clownish since 2020? We've been psyoped for a long time, but not like this. Maybe you just started paying attention in 2020. Many noobs are like, they must be trying to wake us up. They're giving us subtle hints, those of us who are paying attention. They want us to know everything's cool, and, it's like, no, that's hopium. They've always sucked. These are government actors. They don't draw from the best, the most talented. A lot of the crisis actors are scraped out of jail cells. We've met, as in the IPS has met, really nasty people who are repurposed. Instead of serving time, they're put out on the streets to spread misinformation. Yep, there are government-paid misinformation agents. In other words, pedos on parole, wandering around telling people to believe in things like chemtrails and flat earths. Now, whether or not what they're saying has any validity is besides the point. These are the types of people that are employed, and it explains the low-quality productions. The Government Actors Guild, the GAGs we call them, cannot compete with the Screen Actors Guild, and I think they're more likely to be replaced because they don't have any representation. Hollywood is protesting. We don't want to be replaced by AI, etc. Nobody stood up for the Sandy Hookers of the world. All crisis actors in the future might just be rubber and CGI. Gematria 101 says Obama handed out Presidential Medals of Freedom to Hanks, Gates, and Ellen on 11/22/2016, 7 years before his movie release. Ellen, Hanks, and Gates all played major roles in the hoax. Hanks, Ellen, and others have even played into their Pizzagate roles, like they're playing villains. Like, I think there's something to it. I think Tom Hanks is deliberately and wittingly participating in this role. He's basically there to feed into the paranoia fed to the QAnon right, because they have elevated him to a level of villainy for a guy who hasn't really done anything. Many think he's a serial killer, for example, that he killed Isaac Cappy, threw him off a bridge, that he stalks children, and the only thing he leaves behind are clues like single shoes, etc. I mean, no doubt his Instagram is creepy. And no doubt he has done some very questionable things on camera and off camera. Elephant Tusk says, I should have made myself more clear. In the past, it was more believable. You said so yourself. It was only more believable. I think, no, I don't think the quality has improved. Now, there has been some changes in the visuals. So if that's what you're referring to, you could make that argument that the visual depictions have been dumbed down, but in a very subtle way. When they switch from film to digital and bad digital effects, I think they kind of lowered our expectations and blurred the distinction between what is acceptable as real versus fake. And they blurred that distinction on purpose to make us more suggestible and also to make their psyops more believable at first glance. But the visual illiteracy is by design. I often talk about the mind aids they have inflicted upon the public, having removed their mental immune systems, which is designed, of course, to make them programmable. And that's why they have to get rid of us. They want the people consuming the news media to be programmed. They don't want alternative programs. They have to get rid of the non-canonical, the apocrypha, anything heretical. What we're doing is more or less heretical. I mean, they would burn us at the stake. When I say they, I mean the priesthood of the world state church, but they can only do character assassination. G33 says, what are we talking about? We're talking about the immersive illusion that we live within and how its illusions are reinforced by true believers because this is in fact a religion. That mass media isn't informing you. It's it's actually a worldview, a paradigm, and it's disguised as news, but it's quite literally a religious paradigm. I mean, you could be part of a religion and get all of your news from your cult leader, and you'll know what's going on in the world more or less, but you'll have their particular view. And the worldview shaping power isn't only in what they can manufacture and what they can fake and what can't they fake, but it's also in what they exclude, what they find unworthy of attention. So my point being here, for those who are still stuck on trying to mystify predictive programming and say it's some kind of magic and that it must be a higher computer, higher power, a super complex computer that is way beyond man's capacity to create must be writing the news. There are people who are stuck on that. Instead of admitting that this is just propaganda and that they have created a situation where everything we experience as news is actually predicated in some kind of storyline or narrative that has already pre-saturated the media environment. And they've been doing this for a long time. It's not just about the high-profile school shootings, the spectacular terror attacks with high body counts. It's an everyday thing. It's an everyday thing, and it's a worldview shaping mechanism. It steers us. And we'll go through some of this today just to kind of point out some of the examples and how what we're looking at here, what I call the meta script, are indications of this prefabricated, pre-written history that is being acted out on the world stage. Now, speaking of acting out on the world stage, there are a lot of videos showing up where people who say F Joe Biden on Facebook are being visited by the FBI. I don't know if any of you have seen these videos, but there's a ton of them showing up. And I've been looking at these. So Bubble Bath Girl posts this. FBI shows up at woman's house because she posted F Joe Biden on Facebook. They refuse to show her ID on camera. This is how third world countries operate. Let me go ahead and play a short clip here.
And let me take imagery of your IDs.
I'm not going to show you my credentials on the phone.
So you said you were with the FBI?
That's correct.
And why won't you show me your credentials?
We did. I showed you my
I didn't take a look at them. I said, 1 second, I'll be right back. Are you going to show me your credentials or no?
Yeah, we did already. So, and we identified ourselves. So what we'd like to do
I
is
didn't
just
look
have
at
a
your credentials. Again, I didn't verify them. I told you to wait, and I went inside.
Okay, that's correct. What we'd like to do is just have a conversation with you about some social media posts that you've made. Would you be willing to talk to us today about that?
No, I would not. I would like you to later talk on with.
Now this goes on for another 3 minutes. They don't identify themselves. They don't look like FBI agents. They aren't in uniform. There's no uniformity between them. They just look like bros hanging out. I don't know how they're supposed to be passing themselves off as FBI agents. My take on it is these are cosplayers. This is an act. I'm calling this out as a right-wing psyop. They look like crisis actors. Now, what would be the point? Here's the point. The FBI is considered by the MAGA type to be like bad guys. They're against Trump. They're raiding Mar-a-Lago. And if it looks like the FBI is persecuting MAGA, then they can be persecuted kind of like their Emperor God King, Donald Christ. I'm sorry, Donald Trump. And a lot of these videos are raising this up there that, hey, look, we don't have free speech. We're in a third world country if you say F Joe Biden. So obviously, what's going to happen here? I think this is strategic. You're going to have every other MAGA on Facebook saying F Joe Biden, F Joe Biden, because obviously the FBI can't go to everybody's house. So this is going to be something of a provocation. Come and get it. I think it's a hoax. I think it's a psyop. I don't believe it's real. I think this is another kind of like getting swatted. It's a right-wing psyop. But if anybody has anything different, Please share. Ryan X doubles down on his Bohemian Grove story. So here he is. Apparently, he is not letting this go. He goes on to InfoWars and talks about the Grove.
You understand what I'm saying? They do this everywhere. So I everybody's like release it. I can't. I mean, I can, but that wouldn't be the smart move. I'm dealing with some evil people here, and I have to be very
One of the points he makes is that this isn't just at the Bohemian Grove, but this happens everywhere. It's happening in your town, but he can't give us any specific details that will help us catch the bad guys because reasons.
aware. What happened to me was real, and these people are all gonna get their day. Don't worry. Again, I'm working with like the people that could actually take this down, and there's many other stories. Um,
So he might be hooked up with some of the Q white hats who are going to take out the bad guys who are harming the children. So they might actually do it this time around. It's only been 9 years since they've been promising this, and many of those children they didn't rescue are probably voting for Biden because they're of voting age now. But regardless, this is Ryan Garcia doubling down. He still has no names and isn't going to point out any of the Satanists who participate in mass child rape. Like the worst thing you can imagine, the worst people on earth. He knows who they are, but he's not going to say.
as well. Do you believe that they could also erase your memory or attempt to erase your memory? As a question.
Oh, do I believe that there are techniques to erase people's memories?
Yes.
Well, 100%. It's called electroshock therapy,
Okay.
and they with generally just a few quote treatments of it cause.
All right, anyway, this is Alex Jones talking to someone who had a mental breakdown, who is in the middle of some kind of a psychotic break, and he's feeding it. He's enabling it for clicks. They're using Ryan Garcia right now. But we all know he's not serious, that none of what he said is true. A sick cry for attention, maybe it's going to hype up his fight, but if this is his mental state, I don't really have a lot of high expectations for how he's going to perform in his fight. Let's Go replied on my post about predictive programming creating immersive illusions. He said, another example are the weapons of mass destruction of the Iraq War era. This trope was repeated over and over until everyday people felt confident of the existence of these things and our supposed vengeance for 9/11. Yes, yes, they repeated it, and Bush would mock us. He would mock us. He would say, "You just got to repeat it and catapult the propaganda." He even was joking about looking for weapons of mass destruction. And they're all laughing at everybody, obviously. But again, we're looking at hyperstitions, superstitions that become real because they're part of a feedback loop that actually encourages their belief. Got a message from Mr. Trustworthy, going back to the subject of the bridge, the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Mountain Dew just released a new drink called Star Spangled Splash, and the bridge is Francis Scott Key Bridge. So there you have it. Like it splashed into the water, similar to Mountain Dew Maui Blast, as Maui was getting blasted by Chinese space lasers. Interesting how Mountain Dew is part of the predictive programming. See, this is how immersive it is. This is why I call it an immersive illusion. Got a comment from Shireen who says, it's not the pandemic, though is not the pandemic the ultimate recent example of how most people instantly believed the incessant fear-mongering from experts, authorities, and officials, so much so that everyday folks became civilian police at their jobs playing gatekeepers and reinforcers in their homes and out in public. They're inside of and hooked into the mediatized artificial machine mind. They activated the hive mind in 2020, but it was already there. It was somewhat disheartening, but not entirely surprising to see who went along with all of these various Pied Pipers. Like there was some early groups that were protesting lockdowns, and it was fascinating to see how you had these slick alt media types coming in and just stealing all the attention and clicks and steering it into the right side of the political horseshoe and then getting them to get really mad at billionaire bad guys slash saviors. Look, if it's a if there are two ways you can interpret something when it's one of these major psyops, like if it's left or right, you just choose which way you want to believe it. It's probably fake. Like reality's real, and it's not subject to your interpretation that much when it comes to, for example, is Bill Gates a savior or is he an enemy of mankind? Is Elon Musk a savior or is he an enemy of mankind? Can you be both? Well, no, you're either a savior or or if you're an enemy, you can't be a savior. So it's like, well, which is it? Because to the left wing, Bill Gates is a savior, perhaps one of the greatest saviors of all time. He saved us. Thank you, Bill Gates. But to the right, he's the devil, and he killed us all. And he vax again, and a huge number of people, and nobody knows about it or won't admit it because the media is lying. So he's actually a villain. So he's an exterminationist. Depends on which side of the political aisle. Same goes for Bill Gates. Is Bill Gates? I'm sorry, Elon Musk. Is Elon Musk a villain, spreading hate, fascism, preparing for the rise of Trump Hitler, contaminating low Earth orbit with his cheap CubeSats, jeopardizing the future of spaceflight because he's so greedy and egotistical and just wants everyone to be reminded of his legacy 24/7? Or is he a good guy? I mean, is he, it's like you can choose. And if it's that fluid, then it's fake. That's kind of my point here. Continuing here through the notes on the event. And there's a new movie coming out also. I just want to draw attention to this. Godzilla X Kong. And when you look at these movies, these aren't just for entertainment. These are to plant themes. Predictive programming doesn't always perfectly match what happens. Oftentimes, it's reflected in themes, archetypes. You have to remember who's behind the programming and what they actually know. Edward Bernays and Sigmund Freud are both ancestors of the founder of Netflix. And if you look at what Edward Bernays' propaganda in the public mind, the mass mind looked at as such, and they knew how to influence it with perception management. I mean, they were already figuring out mass mind control and putting people into a hyperstitious reality where they can be molded um, a long time ago. And I mean, this has been there from the very beginning of media. Media has never been separate from mind control. It's always been an instrument of government. And then you look at Sigmund Freud, and it gives you an idea of their understanding of communicating to us at levels that we may not be aware of, and also how we're influenced by needs, instincts, fear, etc. So Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, comes out, well, tonight. Actually, it's out tonight. And at the same time, we have Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire. Two references to Empire. Godzilla is a metaphor for the nuke. Now, I'm going to have to do a study on King Kong now that this is being brought up. But Godzilla is a metaphor for the nuke, came out the same year. We've talked about this quite a lot. It beat Oppenheimer. There's a reason why it came out last year. Barbie. I mean, these are the themes, Babylon and the Beast, Barbie and Godzilla, or Barbie and the nuke. This is, the Beast from the Sea. This is why they had Barbieheimer as a meme all summer. The summer of Barbieheimer. It's very occult. But that's what we do here is we decode it. And interestingly, we have a new movie coming out on Amazon called Fallout, which takes place in Vault 33. And I was noting here that Godzilla is stored at sub-level 33 within the Hollow Earth. What does that mean? I think it has a couple of different meanings. Vault 33 obviously is referring to the upcoming lockdown that's going to be based on Fallout. I mean, this is a pretty obvious one. This is how predictive programming works. It prepares you for what they're about to do. We're saturated in it. We're playing video games that put you in these fictional universes, so when you look at the news, it blends seamlessly. And there may be other meanings to it as well. I have a few ideas, but we won't get into esoteric Godzilla right now. Let's continue. Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. So it's another X. Okay, that's one of the points I wanted to raise here. It's another X. We have the X of the eclipse coming up in a little over a week. We have disease X running rampant, which are, of course, mind viruses coming from Twitter. We had the Class X solar flare that shut off AT&T recently. But what is the meaning of this Godzilla X Kong? We shall see. I'll probably have to watch this movie tomorrow. In fact, any channel support, any super chats will go to research, and I will make it a point to check this out because we're looking at so much predictive programming and propaganda to prepare us for the nuke, and Godzilla is a metaphor for it. And there are a lot of clues in the recent movie that tie into this specifically. Okay, continuing Star Spangled Splash coming summer 2024. So here you have it, Mountain Dew, Star Spangled Splash. I remember when all the talk was about the Dew Kids in Maui or in Lahaina, how they were saying that these fires were unnatural, that it was climate chaos, and then of course Trutherville was saying it was Chinese space lasers, direct energy weapons, Mountain Dew direct energy weapon, Maui Blast, and I walked into a Walmart and I see Maui Blast just everywhere. It was inescapable. That's the nature of the echo chamber. And everything you see, you are processing subconsciously. They know this. You're always downloading propaganda into your mind. Now, coming up on 4/8, NASA's going to launch sounding rockets into the moon's shadow. The atmospheric perturbations around eclipse path, or APEP. So APEP is the name of this mission, and it's also the name of the ancient Egyptian deity who embodies darkness and disorder and the opponent of light. So it's a rocket launched during the eclipse, or it's some kind of occult serpent, Satan worship. And you'll find Satan, serpent, sun, all these things are tied together. Sun worship and snakes are very connected. There's sort of this, I guess, tendency to look at, especially from the Christian point of view, to look at serpents as evil because it's darkness. But when we're looking at this, we're looking at duality. It's dark, light, up, down, male, female. It's not necessarily good and bad. So it's important to keep that in mind here. Truthers tend to put things within the Christian framework, but I'm trying to be a bit more objective about it until I arrive at a full understanding of what it actually means. But again, APEP, they're launching some rockets. What does that mean? And it's undeniable that these connections are intentional. One of the last missions that we were discussing is when they sent Osiris Rex, King Osiris, a probe to Bennu, a rock really far away, a space rock. And Bennu is the name of it's the Egyptian phoenix. You could say a proto-phoenix, the first phoenix. But the connection between Osiris, the phoenix, the obelisk, the Burning Man, very interesting stuff when you get into the symbolism of it. But let's get into some of the more recent symbolism because this stuff has been getting intriguing lately. The Telegraph put this out. This is how nuclear war would begin in terrifying detail. So we have this constant drumbeat of World War III, of fallout, of nukes. And what we're really experiencing here is a public education campaign. The public needs to be educated on fallout in order to fear it properly. People who aren't part of a religion, who go to a religion and they see the preacher and they hear the fire and brimstone, they may not be moved by it. They might not be impressed. They might not be quaking in their boots because of what the preacher said about God and God's judgment or Satan and how he's stalking around. But someone who grew up in it is going to be scared and they're going to empty their wallets and they're going to pray for forgiveness. My point being, they have to educate you in advance about what you're supposed to be afraid of in the world state church of mass media so that when they put it on the TV screen, you're properly cowed. Okay, moving on. Again, this is going to get kind of, I think, interesting. We're looking at pictures. This is the nuclear bomb dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending World War II, left shadows of people on the ground. This exhibit suggests several people have suggested the person might be a member of their family. One say it's a 42-year-old woman. They may have identified this person. It's residue. we've been looking at this stuff because we've been finding interesting bits of clues. Like, listen to this. A powerful floating crane that played a role in one of the greatest intelligence coups of the Cold War has arrived at the site of the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse in Baltimore to remove debris. So this is called the Chesapeake 1000. They bring this big crane out there. Now, the reason why this is intriguing is this big crane was used to recover a Soviet nuclear submarine that sank during the Cold War. So when we get into the symbolism of this, the Russian submarine, Hunt for Red October, missing submarine, or untraceable, it all ties into the symbol of the Kraken. And when you go back, it also ties into the beast of the sea, the destroyer in the abyss, Apollyon, Abaddon, and Godzilla. It all ties into the nuke, the destroyer, or the Terminator, as it's referred to in T2. But Terminator, Exterminator, both are derived from the word Apollyon, which is in Revelation 9:11. So, in other words, this mission that this crane was involved in has a correlation with both the symbol of Godzilla and this specific reference to a sunk nuclear submarine. Now, what does this have to do with the crane? There's even more. We're looking at the symbol of the crane as it ties into the story of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we find this story about someone making 1,000 paper cranes to symbolize the people who were damaged by Hiroshima, damaged by, Godzilla. But there's a lot of points that a lot of data points, a lot of news headlines that have been thrown out. This reoccurring theme here having to do with cranes, which again, all this stuff is drawing back to Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Godzilla. PR Images says sound keeps cutting out. Could be the same gremlins that took us off the audio stream. Now this is getting intriguing as well. I wanted to get back to the number 128. So I mentioned this. The movie Leave the World Behind, release 128. Matthew Perry died 10/28, and of course his character Chandler Bing is born on 4/8. So these eclipse references built in here. His death date was on a lunar eclipse. His character's birth date is this upcoming eclipse. But this bridge, Francis Scott Key Bridge, this is kind of our point of focus. Because at 1:28 a.m. it gets hit. It goes down at 1:28. I noticed 128 is a very interesting number. January 28th is the date of the Challenger explosion. And the Challenger exploded at 1 minute 13 seconds. 113, which has a lot of symbolic connection to the Kraken and Godzilla. It's got to be mind mapped to be fully appreciated. But just consider this. This movie released 128, The Bridge 128, Matthew Perry 128. These are connections. Bridge hit 128. Okay, now what does this have to do with Leave the World Behind? At 1 hour and 28 minutes into the movie. 1 hour, 28 minutes, and 11 seconds, you have a burning, exploding bridge in the background. So anyway, we have a bridge reference in the movie with these other connections, which are real connections. And one more thing, because these aren't specious, these aren't cherry-picked, these are continuous narratives that go from movie into the news event and then build on the interpretation. So Francis Scott Key, national anthem, is hugely significant in all of this. Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem, his association with the 1619 Project, the movie has all kinds of references to 1619, the arrival of the first slaves from Africa. Now, the Francis Scott Key Monument in San Francisco was vandalized by BLM in 2020. Afterward, it was replaced. They called it a monumental reckoning. Now, the movie Leave the World Behind is about a reckoning. White lion hitting the beach, an oil tanker hitting the beach, is about social justice, climate justice, and justice for everything from 1619 on. In other words, America's getting its, America's chickens coming home to roost, like Reverend Wright said, Jeremiah Wright. But you see the theme here. The ship hits the shore, so it's America is being hit, and 1619 is hitting. It's a reckoning, and then you have the blackout, and this is all put together by Obama, which tells you even more its political direction. So the Francis Scott Key Monument in San Francisco is removed, and the article is called A Monumental Reckoning, and they replaced it with sculptures representing the first slaves from Africa, the first enslaved Africans. So in other words, the Francis Scott Key Memorial is literally replaced by a 1619 reference right out of the White Lion ship. So these are some very strong storylines. G33 says Edward Bernays' propaganda first published 1928. Yeah, it's been like 100 years they've known how to influence us as a hive mind. G33 says everything has a good side and a bad side in my opinion. Really? What's the good side of cannibalism? There's been a lot of that going around lately. There's the ear. The guy had to eat his own ear. You have the guy in LA eating the leg of the guy who was hit by a train. Then you have the Russian Satanists eating children and now Ukrainians. And I think that there's a rapper, somebody was just kidnapped by barbecue in Haiti and held for ransom. It's like, yeah, there was some kind of ransom story. Someone, who is it? Who was kidnapped by the barbecue gang? But anyway, what's the good side? What's the good side of cannibalism or forced auto cannibalism? If someone makes you eat your own ear, what's the good side? Jocko says, "My oh no, this is always I love hearing this. My older brother was watching the Challenger launch live at school in the 80s. They must have been pushing the hoax on the kids across the country. Yeah, think about it. They are making you witnesses so that you can all cry as a group, react as a group, and your teacher is showing you this thing. And there was a teacher who blew up in the Challenger. So that was very impactful, made everybody cry. And then Ronald Reagan gets on the screen and he's like, well, maybe this had to happen because you weren't paying attention to space anymore. And it's just a coincidence, he said, that 19 years ago, 3 astronauts were incinerated in Apollo 1 on the launch pad. Just a coincidence that 393 years ago, Sir Francis Drake died at sea. So you have these other coincidences, coincidental tragedies with this date. But yeah, they definitely traumatize the children with this thing. They do it with the school shooting drills. It's all MK Ultra. This is why auto hoaxers have the moral and intellectual high ground. We figured out what's going on. Intellectual high ground. We're not dupes. But we have the moral high ground because we're the only ones who are in any way critical of the mind control and the trauma-induced mind control specifically targeted against the innocent. Nobody else is speaking out against that. G33 says Key Bridge, Keystone, Masonic, water 47 degrees. Repeated the morning of the incident by media. Yeah, I recall, and 47 is a very specific number within the Masonic lore, and it has to do with the 47th problem of Euclid. And I believe the compass might be 47 degrees, which some say could represent the sun going north 23.5, south 23.5. But whatever the case, the entire thing is too well integrated into predictive programming to be anything other than a continuation of the same. So when I look at the news, I know I'm watching a movie. I'm not getting triggered. I'm not panicking. Cole says 9/11 was always kind of weird to me. A thing nobody really noticed was at the time George Bush was reading a book to a group of kids. When the hell do you see a president publicly reading to a classroom? He was reading a goat story, right? A goat story. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what was the story of 9/11? The story of 9/11 was a scapegoat story. Osama bin Laden, with his goatee, escaped after being blamed for everything. And if you look at the myth or the story of the scapegoat, what it's about casting the sins of the village into a goat, and then the goat is sent loose into the wilderness. And what happened with Osama bin Laden? It was a scapegoat story. But what's more, we have this.
Get ready to read all.
Here's George Bush reading to the kids, and they all start chanting. And this is completely normal, okay? This is normal. Nothing weird about this. The kids start chanting, plane must hit steel. Kite. This is all, again, a chant as 9/11 happens. And this is just a coincidence.
These words on this page without making a mistake. Look at the letter at the end and remember the sound it makes. Get ready. Kite. Yes, kite. Get ready to read this word the fast way. Get ready. Kid. Yes, kid. Sound it out. Get ready. Kid. Sound it out. Get ready. Kid. What word? Kid. Yes, kid. Boys and girls, sound this word out. Get ready.
Now, if you don't remember this lesson from when you were in school, this is the one where you chant, kite must hit steel. Again, and then it gets a little more repetitive. I'll play the full chant.
And get ready. Must. Yes, must. Let's read these words the fast way without making a mistake.
And after they read them all, they all duck.
Get ready. Kite. Yes, kite. Get ready. Kit. Yes, kit. Get ready. Steel. Yes, steel. Get ready. Plane. Yes, plane. Get ready. Must. Yes, must. Go to those.
All right. And it did. It did. All right, let's move on here. Catching up on your comments. Yeah, kind of a weird thing to be reading to children, for sure. But the main thing to take away from this is that there's nothing intrinsically more significant or amazing or spectacular about 9/11 than any other psyop. It's just a little more of a spectacle, but it's the rule, not the exception. And 9/11 truthers never noticed that everything else was fake. That's one tree in a forest of fakery. And they never really figured it out. They're chasing direct energy weapons, tactical nukes, who done it? Was it Skull and Bones? Was it reptilians? Was it Israel? And they never figured out that this was actually just another scene in a non-stop movie, and that we have a fiction-driven world view, and most people don't know the difference because their frame of reference is the screen. The ones who are truly and deeply programmed. And more importantly, what this event revealed as well is the scale of it. It's not like the American media. We have a government media complex, and it's really tightly controlled here. No, it's not just America. It's quite literally everywhere. G33 says, "Where's my shirt?" I don't work for that company. If you ordered a shirt from Bonfire, you have to call their customer service. I'm not, like, in any way a part of that supply chain. But I do have shirts that I sell on Amazon that say "Kite hit steel plane must," and I actually shaped the words into. In fact, I actually have a tote bag here. I searched "kite hit steel plane must." I searched those words, and it brought up my own product. So if you look at the screen here, this is a tote bag, and it says "Kite hit steel plane must" in the form of the Twin Towers. Most people looking at this probably wouldn't get it, but you could explain it to them. All right, let's see what else we have here. We're going through a lot of the stuff surrounding this event. Wired magazine put this out. Online conspiracy theories about the Baltimore bridge collapse are out of control. Now, I want to point something out. We are not paranoid conspiracy theorists. We are jaded media critics. There's a big difference. And we're also the most informed people in terms of media critics, because the rest of them are part of the misinformation. They're actually swimming in it. But what we're doing here is not conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theories are handed out to alt media to fill in for whatever they don't believe. They're basically alternative beliefs, but we're not conspiracy theorists. We are reverse engineering mass media lies, whether they're presented as the official truth or the alt truth. Conspiracy theorists are calling the Baltimore bridge collapse a black swan event and are blaming everything from Israel to DEI to COVID vaccines. See, I predicted they would blame it on DEI because it was 22 Indians, and they specifically said that, so that's going to trigger the right. Obviously, the truthers will blame Israel for everything because they've been told to. They don't know that it's just a stinky red herring that has them running laps around trees so they don't they don't see the whole forest for what it is. If you're chasing a red herring, you're in Trutherville and you're running in circles. No red herrings out here on the raft. And then, of course, they're going to say the guy was vaxxed and that's why he crashed. Conspiracists, and this is a word that was really made popular, I think, in 2020. They didn't really use this word. It was conspiracy theorists. But I think they realized that conspiracy theorist makes you sound kind of smart, like you have a theory, like you have ideas. But racist is what they use now. Because again, this is the type of mind control that we're unveiling. Very subtle to programming, subtle insinuation, double meanings, but you can't help but see racists. And of course, what does the media do but conflate conspiracy researchers with racists? With good reason, because a lot of them are actually led into it, whether they know it or not. Conspiracists and far-right extremists are blaming about everything and everyone for Tuesday morning's Baltimore Bridge collapse. A non-exhaustive list of things that are getting blamed for the collapse: Biden, Hamas, ISIS, P. Diddy, Nickelodeon, India, Obama, Islam, aliens, Sri Lanka, WEF, wokeness, Ukraine, CIA, Jewish people, China, Russia, Iran, vaccines, DEI, black people, lockdowns, and immigrants. Now, this was just an accident according to the mainstream, and this is what they always do. And it's obviously not just an accident. When you look at the thing going, the light's turning off and it turns and it hits the pole, but this is by design. It's meant to be interpreted in this bifurcated manner, where the true believers just accept what they're told, and the thinkers are going to know it's a lie. So they're going to fall for every alternative explanation, and there's like 50 to choose from. In fact, I think the popular thing right now is this was cyber hacking. Andrew Tate said that, and he has a great deal of credibility on the far right, which is strange and ironic because they used to be against sex traffickers. Do you remember that? Do you remember when the MAGAs and the Qs and the conspiracy theorists on the right were all about save the children, stop child trafficking? Well, now they're taking orders from a human trafficker, which isn't surprising. I mean, they fell for Tim Ballard too, another human trafficker. Okay, let's see here. Phones are open. Trump is selling $60 Bibles with God Bless the USA singer Lee Greenwood. $60 Bibles, and how much are his golden sneakers? 6 presumed dead in bridge collapse. They were immigrants and soccer fans and family men. Now, why is that significant? Martyrs, migrant workers not protected. There's going to be something in there. All right, we have quite a lot more to go through on my Twitter feed, but this is the majority of it. I've got some comments on YouTube I want to go through. Dwayne Garrett says, Normietown, Truthyville, and New Woke City. Yeah, that's the world stage. In the box. If you're in the box, if you're in the propaganda box, you're only in one of these places. You're in Normietown, and then you're eventually going to move into Trutherville or New Woke City if you have a conscience, if you're paying attention. If you're not paying attention, you'll stay in Normietown and you'll be shocked and bemused and maybe even disturbed by the people in New Woke City or Trutherville, but you won't go there. Now, if you see New Woke City and Trutherville as just alternatives to Normietown that are actually deeper in the matrix, there is one other place, but it's a total opt-out from the world stage. It's where we are. Etheric Bliss said, someone finally challenging that Demetria crap, not saying there isn't anything valid or viable about it, but somewhere in the last couple of decades, this all got flip-flopped with American numerology and Hebrew actual gematria. Just a bunch of people twisting, flipping, manipulating, and flexing numbers to control any freaking outcome they wish. This should be left to serious users of this occulted art form, just as tarot is for those in the know. He goes on to say, haha and JL, this cat has been kicking his can down the road for years now. He just changes a few tweaks here, a couple dates there, year after year. He's a scammer, I don't know. He's a self-proclaimed, interesting. Well, we're going through a comment by someone who's referencing my take on gematria and people counting dates between calendars. JL26 Jurassic Liars has indeed, it's not just the numbers or gematria, but he has indeed picked up on some very interesting narrative threads, predictive programming, and there's a lot of interesting material that he's covered. But he has also made predictions based on his his unique way of assessing these relationships, and these are interesting. I mean, it's fascinating when you get into it. But my point is, it is 1,000,000% going to happen this year. On 6/11, Seattle gets nuked. On 8/4, Trump gets the head wound as a birthday present to Donald Trump. It's going to happen this year. There's no way it doesn't happen this year. It won't make sense if it doesn't happen this year. But if it doesn't happen this year, it'll happen next year. 1,000,000,000% sure. I mean, that's what he's suggesting. And this is typical. I actually think it might actually happen this year. So I'm not even kidding here. I think it's probably going to happen. So if you're in Seattle, be ready to call in when they fake the nuke. But there is a thing. There is a fallacy that plagues gamblers, which does in fact, and we see it in doomsday cults as well. It's called the gambler's fallacy, where when you are convinced you're going to win, or you think you're close to a win, you keep losing, and you lose so many times, it makes it feel like you're going to win the next time you pull that lever, or next year the prophecy is going to come true. And this can go on almost indefinitely because of the sunken cost fallacy. You invest in the hope, and this is the basis of the Seventh-day Adventists. The story behind that is they had calculated, I'm not sure exactly how, but they had calculated that Jesus was going to come back. Like there was going to be a second coming, and it was going to be on, I think it was October 22nd, 1844. They believed he would return on October 22nd, 1844, and this would be the biblical Day of Atonement. Now, it didn't happen. He didn't show up. And that became known as the Great Disappointment. Now, the fact that this prophecy didn't come true did not prevent them. It didn't faze them one bit. Didn't shake their faith. Anx G says JL writes himself into the script. He's the one, etc. He was chosen. Well, he is singular in his assessment, although many people have taken all of his predictions and built on it without referencing him. 777 says the left and right always completely flip their orientations in many ways. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I've been looking at this P. Diddy scandal with Jay-Z and as it's building up. And to be quite honest, it feels like Epstein all over again. But Epstein was, for the most part, in the political arena, but this seems like it's kind of recycled. And so this is more in the entertainment. I don't know if it means necessarily left, but I just think it's a repeat. There's a lot of repetition. But there is a lot of this recycling, and there's a frequent role switching. There's lock her up, lock her up. They're going to lock up Hillary. Now it's lock him up. They're going to lock up Trump. All right, let's continue here. I'm going to this guy's comments. He said, at this juncture, even if he predicted 100% everything between now and the next month, I'd have to claim blind squirrel fallacy. Just keep changing things year after year, month after month. Maybe he did read something, but he's never spoken of anything else or predicted anything else. He's stuck on this one thing until it finally hits it. But when this date goes and nothing happens, please say you'll never look back again. Fascinating. Now, this is my take as well. Because I've also been here's why I paid attention to it. the Twitter sphere is being flooded. Here we are looking at narrative structure, story, foreshadowing, scripting. This is like like film studies. What we're doing with this auto hoaxing the mass media. We're approaching this with nuance, with a methodology, and it's rather formalized. And we do have a set of axioms that we operate with, so we're not just random about this whatsoever. We have I'd say, a pretty good system here for how we're analyzing the news. And then I go on Twitter and I find people who are somewhat adjacent. They're like, "Oh, you're noticing this too, but look at this. 6,666 days before this event and before this date, this happened. Or this movie came out, and then 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days later, this came out." And they start building and building and building. And I'm like, okay, what is 66666? What is 77777? What do these numbers actually mean? And prove it. Prove that these have any objective meaning. So they've made up their own system where if it's a repeated digit, it's meaningful and it predicts something. And what's more, they say, man could not have written these scripts. I've had debates with them about this. They argue with me over it. Man could not have written these scripts. You're wrong. Because it's too complicated. You think man was thinking 66,666 days in advance? I'm like, no, there's something wrong here. There's something that's giving them false positives. One, they're using multiple gematria calculators, and if the calendar doesn't fit, they'll say, "Oh, we meant the Julian calendar. Oh no, Gregorian calendar. No, ancient Chaldean calendar." So they're constantly able to switch it. But what I finally arrived at is the fallacy of the Texas sharpshooter. And there's a reason why they're doing it. The Texas sharpshooter fallacy gives you the appearance of being accurate. And I think that this is being done intentionally to flood the zone with conjecture that separates man from being the cause. So many people will say, "You're crazy for thinking man could do all this. It requires a supercomputer." And I'm like, that's a divine fallacy. That's you falling for what Arthur C. Clarke said in his three laws. He's like, any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic. Sure, but it doesn't mean it's magic. And if you're going to say that predictive programming and scripted news is too complex for man, then you might as well say that there's no such thing as computer hackers. It's gremlins because it's too complicated because you can't understand it. Like, I don't know how to hack. Therefore, it must be a higher power. Gremlins. Couldn't be man. You see the limitation of that kind of reasoning? And what it does is it conceals, it hides, it exonerates the perps. Like here we are looking at the metascriptors, checking out their work, understanding how these stories integrate with the news as it's being planned and then acted out. And we're able to discern who's behind it. The producers, the writers, the scripts, the stories, the inspiration for all of it, the astrotheological context, and yet others are, again, muddying the waters. Okay, let's see what else we have here. We says audio streams haven't been live the last few days. Okay, I'm going to work on that right after this. Do some Paris is good analogy. Yeah, thank you. The thing about the gremlins. Look, it's not gremlins doing predictive programming. And if you're saying, I don't know who did it, but it's not man, well, then who are you inserting into this? Aliens? Supercomputers that you can't even figure out where they are? And then who built those? You see, it's a strange thing to introduce the divine or the supernatural and then use that as an explanation and then cease to look at anything else. And I'm saying that Trutherville has been stuck on this point for, okay, from the beginning, I guess after 9/11 is when I started looking at the ritual significance of events. And that's when I first started hearing the phrase revelation of the method. So for like 20 years, truthers have not noticed that somebody or that some entity or that predictive programming is some aspect of propaganda. It has not occurred to anybody. On InfoWars, none of their hosts, none of them have considered that predictive programming might actually have a purpose, that it might be part of media architecture, infrastructure, that it might be part of our programming. And we figured this out by examining it in context, the political messaging, and then noticing that it's not just predictive years in advance. It's not just stuff from The Simpsons. It's not just obscure stuff. It's concurrent. It's every day. One minute you're watching the news and the outrage at the Roe v. Wade leak. Next minute you're watching HBO and you're watching the Queen forced to give birth against her will because the state just sees her as a broodmare, even though she's the most powerful woman in the kingdom, because they need that son. And then she dies. So you cannot escape it. I am not E says they're faking a rapture. The rapture story has been rebranded as War of the Worlds, aliens, judgment. The Space Needle is designed to look like a UFO, and it's a UFO atop an obelisk, and it means the same thing. But yeah, they have been science fictionizing all of the old school religions and myths. I am not E says they will blue beam the savior, but it will be false. Yeah, I tend to agree. My only question is, are they going to have to blue beam it, as in make it physically present so our eyeballs can see it, or are they simply going to use augmented virtual reality? Which is extremely disappointed for those of us who've been expecting something believable. But that's the sad part about this. It doesn't have to be believable. In fact, it can be fake. It can be fake as hell. And it's going to be believable to believers. We are on the other side of the screen. We are skeptics here, and as such, we don't believe it without evidence. But the people who believe by default, I call them auto believers. The auto believers don't need evidence. Dewis in Paris says, is the false savior the real savior or the false savior? Well, the real false savior is going to appear as the real savior as an angel of light. Which makes me wonder then, what does the savior look like? Baphomet? Like, how does that work? And everybody else's religion is of the devil. Religion is such a mess these days. Well, I guess it's always been. And the new religion, though, the dominant religion, is the most unifying one they've ever created, and the people who are part of it don't even know it. I am not, he says, don't believe your eyes on the 8th. I would say only, yeah, that's actually a good point. They could be using that. Everybody's looking up. Because this is the thing about PSYOPs. One thing you can say about pretty much all of them is they synchronize everyone at once. Like everyone has to get the news at once. They try to get a uniform reaction. In fact, even Ye, after the Uvalde shooting, Ye had made some point about how the story about the shooting had already percolated to everybody around him, and that no matter what media platform, no matter where you were, you could not help but hear that. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about predictive programming creates immersive illusions. We live within an immersive illusion. Our reality has been hacked, not by gremlins, but by the metascriptors. And this is not a stretch. This is not hard to understand, or even it's rather simple. If you think about your basic run-of-the-mill PSYOP, place gets shot up, mass casualty drill is presented as real. We know they scheduled that drill in advance, months in advance, a year in advance, 6 months. These things are coordinated, and it involves a lot of agencies. So when you're looking at a psychological operation, you're already looking at prefabricated history, an event that's going to go down in history, that's written in advance, acted out on the world stage, then it becomes real. Look at Parkland. And every single actor in that production is now real. They step out of the screen. This is what's so intriguing about this process is they have prefabricated events, they act them out, now they're real. Now the fake people are real. And they're realer than us. I won't exist in 100 years because they will have deleted all of our content. And every single big name crisis actor will exist. They will have statues. There will be a statue of David Hogg in DC where, he's credited with having saved the children. So there's all kinds of examples here of the tampering with reality with prefabricated, pre-scripted events. And we don't just limit this to the mass shootings. It's quite literally everything. It's bigger than most people in the box can imagine. Everything is under control. John Cordone says, "Are you taking calls?" I am taking calls. Phones are open. 505-349-0420. G33 says, "Intention is everything I've heard." I would say attention. We have this Insta-talk book reality. Everybody's filtered, everybody's attention span is splintered, fragmented. And I don't think people's attention spans are shorter. I don't think that's the case at all. I just think there's more competition. Now, Greta already has a statue. Before Greta emerged on the world stage to challenge our capitalism and blame the older generations, there's already a statue of Greta at the Bull in New York. Here we go. The Fearless Girl. Statue first installed at the northern tip of Bowling Green and Broadway facing the charging bull. So this Fearless Girl statue, installed March of 2017, is a girl promoting female empowerment. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Greta Thunberg. I don't think I'm wrong about this. And she was already, look, this is something else. I walked into a Walgreens and I see this plush doll of a girl with pigtails or braids. And it says Frozen. And I mentioned earlier Frozen Empire, which I think references nuclear winter. But I'm seeing Frozen. And I'm like, okay, instantly I thought this looks just like the girl who was at the UN excoriating us for our carbon footprints and ruining our future. And I'm like, wait, this can't be a coincidence. The little children who are watching Elsa in Frozen are probably being bonded with Greta. Like, this is how they do their like right now they're being bonded with the Horror of Babylon through Barbie dolls. Greta was definitely, I thought, this has got to be target marketing, and they're using Elsa and Frozen to somehow get the messaging in. So then I looked this up, and it turns out I found this great article that said, here we go. It was Frozen 2. So Frozen 2 was actually based on Greta Thunberg. And one of the storylines here is this character had to tell her parents that they were polluting and destroying the kingdom. Disney's sequel has an environmental message for the Greta generation. But I didn't watch the movie, Frozen, but I saw the doll, and I instantly made that connection. This is how immersive the illusion is. And I look, and no, this is not me being paranoid. Adults taking their children to the Frozen sequel will be braced for a cute character and all the infuriating catchy songs, and then some. Now you can find the article yourself, but I'm just bringing it up. I think some of you even pointed out that Rapunzel looked like Greta, and she lived in a place called Corona Island and was quarantined. We found many such examples. Let me complete this message here that was sent to me by Etheric Bliss. He said, "I just discovered your work, by the way. I have to say I dig most of what you're laying down and the direction you're headed. I'm very dubious in joining clubs, sects, or groups. Way too much. I see. We'll see where you take this." Yeah, this is a think tank. It's not an echo chamber. It's an open platform. And it is a cult. We are fomenting a culture of disbelief. Joined by Buzz Dean. Thank you for joining. And yeah, phones are open if anybody wants to call in. Lean Dion says it was the young girl, Era Stark, that defeated the frozen winter knight in Game of Thrones. Very interesting. Game of Thrones, Iron Throne, Westeros burns. See, I think Westeros burning with the red dragons is some kind of reference to China dropping nukes on us. House of Stark, Iron Throne, Tony Stark, Iron Man. The House of Stark logo has been spotted on Mars. And guess who's taking us to Mars? Tony Stark, Iron Man, Elon Musk. But the House of Stark on Mars is kind of a Game of Thrones tie-in to the Mars mission. Here it is. It's really intriguing when you look at all the ways that there are mass media tie-ins to the space fakery. Like the moon of Saturn, one of its moons, Mimas, looks exactly like the Death Star. And then you look at the iconography in Star Wars, and you're like, well, Darth Vader is Saturn, so it makes perfect sense that the Death Star would be one of Saturn's moons. But the Stark, the Iron Throne, even the planet Mars is associated with the metal iron. It's the red planet. And I've been talking about this recently, about the red planet, Red Star, the Russian novel Red Star from 1908 about perfecting communism on Mars and then bringing it back down to Earth. Anyway, let's continue. Erica Creech says, maybe they were cyber hacked. Perhaps they need to go back to old navigation and steering. Oh, you're talking about the boat? Now, look, this is interesting how the day before the boat went down, and there's a couple of Titanic tie-ins. There was a door in the movie Titanic that sold at an auction for $718,000. And I posted this in Discord, and I said, they're selling the Titanic door right now. This is some kind of foreshadowing because the Titanic is a metaphor for the West, which is about to sink. A whole other set of narratives or rabbit trails here. But the main thing is a door from the Titanic. What does this mean? And this is the day before the boat steers into the bridge. And so it's kind of interesting again. It's also surreal. And of course, the boat's name is the Dolly. Okay, another comment from Middleman AD. It says, Tim, look what's going on with the Washington Bridge in Providence, Rhode Island. It's also down. They have a huge safety issue and they need to rebuild the whole thing. They've limited lanes and they're causing huge traffic jams. They just finished updating it a few years ago. I live local and I travel the bridge a lot, but I won't be going to Providence for at least 5 years because the traffic is that bad. I think they are further limiting our ability to travel. They're beginning to group us into districts. Okay, that's making sense. Last year it was trains derailing. This entire year it's been planes falling, uh, people on planes freaking out. That MFR isn't real. Just the regular stuff that makes plane travel look, well, horrifying. Subway travel, it's so bad. People getting shot, people getting thrown on the rails. They have 1,000 National Guard to keep the peace because it's so bad in the subways. So subways, planes, trains, and now this is starting to form something of a picture, which is all built into the leave the world behind. It's about everything shutting down. But the plane stuff has been especially dramatic here. Poker and Politics says, in my signs of conspiratorial thinking number 4. Okay, this is good. Here's why I picked this up. This is an anti-conspiracy theorist, and he is noticing something. He's noticing what we're doing. He says, signs of conspiratorial thinking 4, knee-jerk contrarianism. It is the understanding that a conspiracy theorist might not know what did happen in a situation, but they do know to reject what they're told. So this guy has called this a sign of conspiratorial thinking, knee-jerk contrarianism. I would call this auto-hoaxing. What he doesn't understand is that knee-jerk contrarianism is justified and absolutely called for when you're dealing with state propagandists and pathological liars. You should be skeptical. Skepticism is knee-jerk. It's automatic. It's the suspension of judgment. So it's not knee-jerk contrarianism necessarily. It looks that way, but it's really just applied logic. And this person says it's the sign of conspiratorial thinking. No, actually, you being an automatic believer with no contrarianism in you whatsoever, unless it's directed at the critics, makes you an auto believer. This person automatically believes, meaning he's not doing any thinking. He's not doing any thinking. He's doing just believing. It's a very passive way of taking in information. And then he's referring to those who don't take it in as engaging in, quote, conspiratorial thinking. But yeah, he has a point. He's right, but they aren't wrong. Poker and politics. I follow a lot of anti-conspiracy theorists just to see where they are. People of the box, people of the tell lie vision. You can learn a lot. I study Mike Rothschild's work, and these many of these individuals are so deep in the box that they don't know they're in it, and they don't have the frame of reference to really understand what media is. But they love to talk down, they love to condescend, and that's fine. Elephant Tusk says the Black Sun cartel took over this world a long time ago. I Am Not E says demon spotting is now an official illness now. I've seen that. Demon spotting. A number of people pointed this out that there's a lot of movies that have these strange, weird, grinny, Joker-like faces. And then this other story has come out about this illness where people appear to see other people as demons because of some kind of a demon face syndrome, a psychiatric disorder. A rare disorder. Here's an article on it. A Tennessee man has a rare disorder that causes face to appear distorted in shape, size, and texture. To him, they appear as demonic. And some say that this so-called disorder is not a disorder, but it's merely a cover story for when the veil drops during the eclipse and all the people in your life who are secretly demons will be exposed for what they were the entire time. Wouldn't that be convenient and nice? Like, if the good people had halos and the bad people had horns, it would save us all a lot of time. But yes, if you're seeing a bunch of demons, they're not demons, it's a mental disorder, and go see your doctor. And I've looked at how they say this guy's um, um, perceiving these faces with this disorder, and they look like the demon faces from Devil's Advocate, actually. Kind of an interesting stretched out face, very wide mouth, Joker, smile, menacing. But 4-8, expect that. 4-8 is either going to be the end of the world, the beginning of the end, in a very conspicuous way, or it's going to be a triple nothing burger with a side of hopium that it'll happen next time. But I'm not going to let these prophets, especially the gematria prophets, get away with it. Anybody who is promoting the idea that this is the end and who have staked their reputation on 4-8 is going to be called to task if nothing happens. All right. Yeah, phones are still open. I've heard people say it's not working, and I also heard that the audio streams aren't working. Your other option is to join Skype. We have about 7 minutes left if you can get in. And if you go to ips.monster, there's a join Skype link. Psyopsicle says, nothing burgers, surely. Well, everybody who predicted the end would happen on 4-8 also predicted that the world would end during the Super Bowl. Now, this hype about Taylor Swift was not mere hype to promote Taylor Swift. It did have a subtext. It was not a coincidence that when they looked at her on the screen, she's drinking from a chalice as her friend is making the devil horns and has the upside down cross. Like they have to do their satanic rites during all these things. Alicia Keys in the red dress, getting groped by Usher in white. She's playing the role of the Scarlet Woman, the high priestess in this Mystery Babylon Super Bowl fertility rite. Same costume, same wardrobe that Rihanna wore before that. Elephant Tusk says 4-8 seems like the beginning of the event, not the end. See, I won't accept that because I had someone tell me that 9/23/2017 the world ends, and I said, give me your car. He wouldn't. I needed a car. If you're getting raptured, you're flying. Like, you're not needing a car. And he wouldn't give it to me. Well, it didn't happen. And he said, well, no, it's not going to end on 9/23. That's just the beginning of the end. And it's going to be 7 years of tribulations. I'm like, okay. So it's not going to end. So if you're saying that 4-8's just the beginning of the end, then I'm sorry, you've just moved the goalpost. Like, no, that's not going to work. It ends on 4-8 or it's a nothing burger. And none of these apocalypse predictors should ever be listened to again. You ever heard of the boy who cried wolf? That's what we're dealing with here. All right, let's see what else. Cyber attack, says Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate with his 33 Bugattis, totally legit, says it's a cyber attack that caused the boat to hit the bridge. Now, one of my contentions here, like Liz Churchill here says, this was an attack. We're in World War III. Every politician that cannot state this is complicit. This is the typical Trutherville take where they add on a level of horror to the existing story. The mainstream media story, it was an accident. Trutherville, it was a major conspiracy. Someone like me, I'm not in their box. I'm like, wait a minute. Even if a boat did hit that post, intentionally or not, would it have pulled the bridge down like that? I have my doubts. I have a lot of doubts about this. In other words, I think it was a controlled demolition, if anything, that it was meant to fall. So, in other words, it's not a terror attack, that this was theater, that this is a psychological operation, it's a psyop. And again, if you look at the symbolism of the bridge, Francis Scott Key, National Anthem, Mountain Dew, Leave the World Behind, you can see the composite picture here. And we have only begun to see the effects of this, the quote, fallout. Oh, by the way, on 4/8, the deep state's going to destroy the world with CERN. They're cranking up CERN with their 666 logo, Shiva, goddess of destruction, out in front. I think it's a cult that worships Cernunnos, the horn god. Shiva is said to be the great destroyer who will annihilate the universe in the end of times, only to be reborn as part of the endless cycle. Again, here you have the CERN logo. And yes, they're going to do something on 4/8. And NASA is shooting APEP. They're shooting rockets as some kind of gesture to the sun god or something. But yes, there's a lot of stuff going down. Here's the article I mentioned earlier. Barbecue has captured a live streamer named Your Fellow Arab. Your Fellow Arab is being held on a $600,000 ransom. Barbecue seized him and is demanding 600,000 US dollars. Duas in Paris says, if an actual burger comes along, our stomachs will all have shrunk by then and we'll have zero interest. Maybe that's the play. Yeah, I reference back to Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals, number 9. The threat of the thing is more terrifying than the thing itself. They can keep everyone in a defensive posture, braced for the next hit, and it never comes, indefinitely. And when they finally do it, it's going to lose its power because most people are going to believe it, but a lot of us are going to call it fake. And then they won't be able to do it again. Like if they had the captive audience and total media control, they would do a 9/11 every week. They wouldn't let us rest. But they have to be mindful of the fact that we're not all 100% reality impaired. Elephant Tusk says part of their game is making people on the fringe look crazy. Well, this is one more point. I'm glad you brought this up. The fringes look crazy, left and right. And it's to make you run back to Normieville. But we can't let Trutherville or Truthers or Alex Jones claim to be the fringe. You can't let Andrew Tate be the fringe and let them speak for you. We have out-fringed the fringe so far that they want nothing to do with us. In fact, most of the people on the establishment-friendly fringe would love to see us censored. They don't stand up for or care about channels that aren't part of their alt media network. It's all controlled opposition anyway. But one of the things I want to really accomplish this year is for those of us who are media skeptics on this level to actually divorce, to go so far from the fringe, the acceptable fringe, that we're seen as what we are, which is a separate entity, a parallel media, not alt, not mainstream, not in the box. Great article posted by Petra Liverani, PSYOP detective. PSYOPs, nobody dies, nobody gets hurt. I'll put a link to this below, but I'm glad to see this. I'm really glad to see another PSYOP investigator writing articles on Substack challenging the premise that people are even dying. He asks, why would the deaths be real? And some people will say, well, they wouldn't care about killing people, and he argues against that. They would kill for greater realism, and he says, no, horror movies don't require real deaths. They're all about make believe, and PSYOPs work on the same principle. Anyway, this is a great piece. I'll put a link below answering the question, why wouldn't they use real deaths? And I call people who insist that people are really dying in these events, I call them death clingers. Death clingers, because they can't let go of that. Or corpse clutchers, if they try to claim a moral high ground over those of us who don't believe. Like, how dare you not believe? But it's a very important concept, and I'm going to be looking for more articles like this, and hopefully he gets interviewed on Fakeologist. I saw them communicating in the comments, and I'll probably reach out as well. But I think we need a lot of this. I want to find more writers and bloggers on the subject who may be able to contribute or allow their work to be added to the Inciter, which will be a paper that has content from our frame of reference. Why NASA will fire 3 rockets at the Ring of Fire solar eclipse. We'll keep an eye on that. Again, it's coming up in a few days. It's called APEP, and APEP happens, and again, it stands for Atmospheric Perturbations Around the Eclipse Path. And APEP is also called Apophis. So we're talking about the god of darkness and chaos. And Apophis, we've heard this before, is the name of a planet killer asteroid 99942. Apophis, which is going to kill us on Friday the 13th in April of 2029, they said. On April the 13th, 2029, Apophis will pass within 20,000 meters of our planet's surface. So it's likely to kill us. It is a planet killer. I actually heard a song, I think it was by Cradle of Filth, called Crawling King Chaos. I won't play it because of copyright, but it's a satanic rock band basically praising Apophis because when it hits us, it'll bring about worldwide chaos. So anyway, NASA's honoring that particular deity here on the 8th. Dewis in Paris says there's no actual nuke, but there's muscle fatigue from ducking and covering. Yeah, the threat of the thing. Look how many years they have been scaring us. And these movies like Godzilla, we mentioned this. These are archetypes. These are reinforcement to give you the full spectrum of what this thing represents. Total annihilation, this unfathomably massive beast, something that would just shut everything down. I mean, they have to make us think that this is the worst thing in the world, and we must do whatever it takes to make it not happen. We must please the government. We must listen to all the madmen, because if any one of them gets a little too triggered, they wake up on the wrong side of the bed, they push a button, and our atmosphere gets incinerated. And one more point. I'm talking to people on X about predictive programming, etc., and one of them was like, "Oh, you're paranoid connecting these things." And it's like, I'm not paranoid. I'm a jaded media critic. You are a paranoid believer in mainstream agitprop. And if you're a true believer in the mainstream, you believe in nukes. You believe in planet killer asteroids. You believe in whatever they tell you. What does that make you? That makes you a paranoid cultist. Meanwhile, here we are putting the brakes on it. Like, let's tap the brakes on all this compulsive belief in nonsense. And let's just know what we can know and stand on that. And it leaves us with a lot of questions, which, again, was why the media created in this last Batman movie, they've introduced the archetype of the Riddler as the new bad guy, this villain who asks a lot of questions, associates that with Q, who are just asking questions. They've really demonized the question mark. I Am Not E says we have no more freedom than any other country. You know, when people say they're going to take our guns, I remind them, they've already taken our minds. So, in other words, when we say are we free, are we not free, it's like I kind of don't know if that word even means anything in the context of an alternate reality game that we were born into without being briefed on it first. There's no free people in the Matrix. Plato's cave, they give you the illusion, but the question of what free means in this context is what I'm raising here. Just as we raise other questions. What does it mean that nobody died in 20 years of fake school shootings? That's great news. But you tell the true believers, they get mad at you. Nobody died in blank, any event, any situation. If you tell them it's not as bad as they say, they're just terrorizing you, they tune you out. They don't want to hear it. So I'm like, well, we're maybe we're not free of the mind control and the superstition and this high-tech dark age, this age of endarkment, but at the same time, things aren't as bad as people believe. It's kind of good bad. Not sure. It's an interesting question though. Like I don't agree with the power. I don't agree with the power elite. I don't agree with the idea that we must be ruled over on the premise that we're all as bad as the lowest common denominator actors. Like I have a higher opinion of mankind, but apparently the powers that be think we need to be ruled over by superstition, terrorized into compliance, and molded into a hive mind that represents the ideal citizen. We're all supposed to be Truman in our Truman shows, sticking to our scripts and believing the lies. Anyway, thanks for joining. I'll fix the phones and I'll fix the audio, and we'll resume this conversation tomorrow, Infinite Plane Saturn Day. This is Auto Hoax, Chief Crow.
I'm on Auto Hoax, and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time, baby, for another crisis actor with soulless eyes.
My buddy and me.
Telecommunications Act of 1996. 96, y'all. Gonna filter your